It's been an action-packed week in Boca Chica. We had the vehicles for Flight 3 rolled out to the launch site and stacked at the pad. We also got some road closures posted for testing of the full stack, and we got a nice little update from the FAA regarding the regulatory status of Flight 3. And thus we have arrived at the beginning of the final steps towards Starship's next launch. I'm Jack Beyer for NSF, and this is your Starbase Update. Let's start the week off over at the production site, specifically at Mega Bay 2, where we can see work is continuing on its roof and the area right above the recently installed glass windows. Next door to Mega Bay 2 is, of course, the Star Factory. SpaceX is continuing to expand Star Factory toward the road while outfitting and completing the previously constructed portion of the structure. Next up, we got a peek at some future flight hardware. Here's Booster 12 in the Mega Bay. It already features grid fins and is now fully stacked, but so far, not featuring a hot staging ring. Gosh, it looks so new and shiny since it hasn't yet had time to be ravaged by the dust, salt, and sand-filled Starbase air. Next to the production site, the area around the Starbase sign saw some more work this week, but it wasn't some kind of fancy new facility that's gonna blow your mind. Nope, just more parking spots. SpaceX has even started putting asphalt down, so if you work at Starbase and you're watching this, your parking situation might improve significantly in the near future. But you already knew that. While we're talking about activity around the Sanchez lot, this week we also had some developments in regards to Starbase's second launch tower. Man, you really know it's an action-packed week when second launch tower things aren't even mentioned in the cold open. A column for Section 9 of the tower was moved at the Sanchez lot, but this is not the only part of the tower that's on the move. 4 segments of the second launch tower have started to make their way to Boca Chica on a single barge. The expectation is that they will arrive this week. This is a tower that was originally planned for use in Florida, but is now being relocated to Starbase, since SpaceX has decided to go ahead with building a second tower there. More parts of the tower were also delivered. Here we can see a column section for Section 9 of the tower. Currently, parts for Section 8 and 9 of the tower are being moved and worked on at Starbase. Here we see work on a pillar for Tower Segment 8. They have been tinkering around with it lately, and this will be part of the second to last section of the tower, at the very top. Another of the pillars for Section 8 was then erected right next to it. Alright, let's keep things moving along and take a look at some of the other vehicles around Starbase. This week, Ship 31 got some more tile work done on it, and so now it features a more complete heat shield. Right now, the expectation is that Ship 31 will fly on Flight 6, if SpaceX doesn't skip anything. 31 would be paired with Booster 13. Next up, this is a video of Starhopper. There's nothing new about Starhopper, but Starhopper's cool, so it made the video. Also, while we're just sightseeing, let's take a look at the cameras, or perhaps more accurately, camera housings on top of the launch tower. This also isn't new, as these cameras, or again, housings, were spotted long ago, but they're still cool. What I wouldn't give to get to put a camera or two on top of that tower. I don't even care if they get roasted by Super Heavy. Next up, here's Booster 12, and right next door to it is Booster 11, which will, of course, be the next booster to fly after Starship Flight 3. And the vehicle pairing for Booster 11 is Ship 29. Next up, after weeks of work on the LR-11000 crane at the launch site, it finally moved once again. This crane has been undergoing heavy maintenance, and it's really good to see it back online. Moving right along, even at night, work in the Mega Bay does not stop. Booster 12 is on the left, and Booster 11 is on the right. You can see Booster 11's methane tank hatch is open, which can easily be done inside of a bay, as the whole booster can be attached to the crane for stability. Next up, the return of an old friend. That's right, the relocated ground fabrication building, which we've been watching the reconstruction of for the last few months, seems to be almost fully operational again. And next to it is one of the new booster transport stands, which will come in handy as SpaceX works to ramp up the cadence of Starship launches. Speaking of returns, we also saw the return of Cybertruck to Starbase. Of course, with the car now being delivered to customers, it could also just be an employee who bought one. Either way, it's a really cool thing to see at Starbase because, you know, stainless steel truck, stainless steel rocket, it just works. And this time, no drones were harmed. That we know of. Alright, now for the meat and taters. Over at the launch site, we had more and more indications that SpaceX was getting ready to get into a testing campaign ahead of Flight 3. SpaceX was preparing more and more hardware, verifying and testing its integrity, and all of this started with the booster quick disconnect. The BQD is needed to provide propellant to the booster and to protect the fueling hardware during liftoff. This system was tested and verified multiple times. You can see the retraction tests here. But that's not the only hint we got of impending rollout and testing. The booster transport stand sitting at the ring yard, why is that a big deal? Well, it is needed to, transport a booster to the launch site. The stand was moved inside the mega bay only to exit it a few hours later. Classic SpaceX hitting the confuse the media button. Interestingly, SpaceX is still working on parts of the orbital tank farm, even with testing and a launch coming up soon. Another LOX pump power head was removed. This is far from the first time we've seen them working on the pumping system for the LOX and methane side of the tank farm. More work on the LOX pump power heads, say that 3 times fast, was conducted later in the week. Also, these shots are a really cool way to get a sense of scale for these things. I mean, look at the human right there. Speaking of pumps, here's a new pump for the LOX side of the orbital tank farm, with the power head to the left and the pump to the right. SpaceX also installed some of the GSE piping, which will be needed to integrate all of the new horizontal tanks that have been installed into the tank farm. Next up, this shot here is not just a cool shot of cars scooting by. This shot is cool because we can see Ship 28 and we can see some work being done on its tiles. This tile work was yet another promising sign that SpaceX was working to get ready for Ship 28's rollout. Next to Ship 28's tile work, Ship 26 also saw some more work with its weird stringers attached. Sadly, we still don't know what's going on with this cursed flapless Starship. Next up, more shielding was installed on the base of the tower. Said shielding was mostly installed at the base of the tower, and presumably this is the area that needs it most during a launch. This wasn't the only area that was reinforced though. SpaceX is also working on a new blast wall that protects the comms bunker and LOX subcoolers. Sadly, this is also the wall that will make it harder to see the area underneath the mount for full stack testing and launch, but that's just the way that it goes. Over at the orbital launch mount, work is continuing. There is still a lot of scaffolding on the OLM, and crews are still working on it, getting the pad ready for Flight 3. Another thing SpaceX did last week was purge the booster quick disconnects. These are used to ignite some of the Raptor engines during ignition of the booster. You can see the stream of gas as they purge this system, presumably both in preparation for the return of a booster and also to remove any FOD from the lines. That's foreign object debris. And yes, this is also another good sign that SpaceX was getting ready to move a booster to the pad. A second of these purges was also done shortly after, and then a purge of the main QD system. There's one delivery that we always see lots of in Starbase, especially when activity is ramping up, and that is of nitrogen. Here you can see a delivery of nitrogen to the tank farm. It's used to chill down the tank farm and purge propellants and GSE lines. Alright, then it was time for the main event. Booster 10 was moved out of the mega bay and began to roll down Highway 4 toward the launch site. Since Booster 10 has already been static fired and was rolled back to the production site just for final work, this is hopefully its last trip down Highway 4 to the launch site before finally lifting off on Flight 3. The booster was first slowly moved out of the bay, as we've seen many times, and then once it was on Highway 4, it wasted no time in getting to the launch pad. It's a little bit hard to see with the new stand, but the Raptor engines were getting a nice warm little ride as they're still sitting in their protective booties. An interesting note here is the addition of a few weld lines which were not present during the last time we saw Booster 10. These weld lines could be due to the addition of more slosh baffles, which would help mitigate fuel sloshing inside the booster during flip and boost back. This could be something that SpaceX implemented to fix the problems from Flight 2. After arriving at the launch site, the chopsticks opened for Booster 10 and the QD arms swung out for the lift. Booster 10 then moved inside the chopsticks for the lift, which happened a few hours later. Speaking of things getting rolled out and lifted, Ship 28! Booster 10's partner in crime. It was rolled out over the weekend and then stacked late on Sunday night. We did get a little punked by the klaxon at the launch site and went live expecting the ship to be lifted, but at least we got some good music out of it, so all is well. As I said, Ship 28 was eventually lifted atop Booster 10 late Sunday night and gingerly lowered down on top of it. SpaceX then lifted Ship 28 up just a little bit, tweaked the alignment before setting it back down for good with a satisfying thump. Listen to the thump. And with that, we finally have a full stack in Starbase once again, just about 3 months since Flight 2. Not too shabby, SpaceX. We expect the booster and ship to undergo some full stack testing ahead of launch. In fact, road closures for this exact type of testing have been posted on Cameron County's website. Speaking about updates about the launch, NASA spaceflight was provided with a statement from the FAA about the regulatory status of Starship's third flight. In this, the FAA states that they are waiting on some more information from SpaceX in order to approve the modifications SpaceX has requested to the launch license. Quote, the return to flight of the Starship Super Heavy vehicle requires the OFT-2 launch mishap investigation to be closed, and the launch modification for the OFT-3 launch to be approved. The SpaceX-led mishap investigation remains open, and SpaceX has not yet submitted all the needed information for the license modification. Please contact SpaceX for additional information, end quote. So for now, regulatory status remains red for a flight, but that could change fairly soon. All of this makes a flight in February more and more unlikely, and at this point I'm guessing early March. Frankly, I'm not surprised. This is still a very new vehicle, and it's all a test program after all. As SpaceX completes testing of the full stack and we get closer and closer to launch, it will become easier to determine what an actually plausible date for Flight 3 is. So stay tuned here as we all watch the future unfold together.
Hey everybody, Ryan here in the edit. So as it turns out, right as we were ready to click publish on this video, SpaceX decided to destack Ship 28 from Booster 10. Very helpfully they did that. So you might be able to forget like the last 5 minutes of this video. I don't know. They have probably already restacked it by the time you've watched this video. We don't know what's going on anymore. So of course, as always, if you want a live feed of what on earth Ship 28 is doing, you know where to go. Starbase Live will answer all of your questions.
I hope you're all as excited as we are for some full stack testing this week, and the ramp up in activity as we get ever closer to Flight 3. So, what do you think? Is it going to be in early March? Late February? Something else? You know the drill. Let us know in the comments. But either way, thanks for watching, and don't forget, be excellent to each other.